All right, good morning, Badlandia. Welcome to Badlands Daily.
It really feels like the cat with the laser pointer. It's like you've led the cat up to the top of the building and now you're leading it over the edge.
President Trump is rebalancing trade around the world and making things more fair for the American people.
I think that anytime the deep state can like overcapitalize in whatever situation they have, they're going to.
But the rest of it is a very well organized and well funded color revolution operation of the type they run all over the world again and again and again to destabilize entire society.
All right, good morning, Badlandia. Welcome to Badlands Daily. Today's Ash Wednesday, so that means I'm joined by Ash, of course. How you doing, Ash?
Good. Good. Right. Doing good. Feeling good. How are you, Brian?
I am wondering how I'm going to get through this show because the whole timing issue there screwed me up and I didn't get my coffee.
Oh, no.
I know. Normally I have 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
Text Christy. Tell her to bring you some coffee.
She's already gone. Gone.
No.
That's okay. I'm going to poison myself with a monster.
Okay.
Get through. I did get water, so that's good. That's good.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I only had one coffee pod left in the house. So I'm like very slowly sipping my coffee so it doesn't go away.
Well, does Caleb drink coffee?
Yeah. We have 4 adults that drink coffee in the house.
Yeah, that's not cool, man. That's not cool. I've only got 2, and it's a struggle for that last cup.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not going there. All right, guys. Well, welcome to the show. We're going to be joined here by a special guest about 10:10, you said?
Yeah, 10 after. She said she'd join.
All right. So before we get into that, let's go ahead and jump into our sponsors, and I'll talk to you guys about our friends over at CB Distillery because their VIP sale is happening right now. Over at CB Distillery. For a limited time, you can save up to 50% off everything when you use promo code RUMBLE. It's the perfect time to stock up. If you're looking for better sleep, battling that daily stress, or trying to ease that nagging pain after exercise, CB Distillery has plant-based solutions just for you. CB Distillery has plant-based options to support sleep, less stress, pain after exercise, mood, and focus. And yes, they've got CBD for your beloved pets too. Probably more important than some of the people. In my opinion. That's just my opinion, though. Pets over people every day. No, I'm
yikes, Brian.
I'm kind of kidding. I don't know. You mess around with my dog, man. We're gonna have some struggles. So my dogs get CBD. I get CBD too. I was gonna say me not so much, but that would be a lie. Every CB Distillery product is made with premium quality, clean ingredients, and no fillers or artificial anything. And with over 2 million customers, CB Distillery is the trusted name in CBD. So better sleep, calmer days, or natural pain relief sounds good for you. This is your chance to save. Take advantage of the VIP sale and save up to 50% site-wide with promo code RUMBLE. But hurry, it won't last long. Visit cbdistillery.com and use promo code RUMBLE to save up to 50%. That's cbdistillery.com, promo code RUMBLE. Specific product availability depends on individual state regulations. And there we go.
Ooh, Artsy Jones says, I just sketched Brian's dogs onto canvas.
Nice.
Awesome.
Looking forward to that. Yeah, pets, like my pets, man, you mess around with my pets and we'll fight.
Yeah, they're family.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, maybe not over people, but
there you go.
Over a lot of things. Pets over property. How about that?
Yes. Pets over government. 100%.
Pets over government. Well, government consists of people.
Kind of. But those are special kind of people.
Yeah, we assume they're people.
Despots. Pets over despots.
Yeah, something like that. All right, let's also let's talk a little bit about lean. Ash, you want to talk about lean?
Everybody's talking about weight loss injections because the results are so dramatic. They work by lowering blood sugar and reducing appetite. So what if you're looking to lose weight but not interested in painful weekly injections, especially when you hear about how some of those intense side effects, like blindness? They say those injections cause blindness. Crazy. That's why doctors created a weight loss supplement called Lean, and the results are remarkable. The studied ingredients in lean have been shown to lower your blood sugar, burn fat by converting it into energy, and curb your appetite and cravings so you're not as hungry. But listen, lean is not for the casual dieter. With only a few pounds to lose, the doctors at Brickhouse Nutrition created lean for frustrated dieters with 10 or more pounds to lose. Let's get you started with 20% off, free rush shipping, so you can add lean to your healthy diet and exercise plan. Visit takelean.com and enter Badlands for your discount. Promo code Badlands at takelean.com. And this is a product that I actually use. And I can't say enough good things about it. I took it last year, started like a little bit before we went to Vegas. So that was in March, I think. And and I dramatically lost weight very quickly. And then I got within that 10 pounds, and it is like, you know, you're not hungry anymore. It's like when you have like just less than 10 pounds. So then I stopped taking it, didn't gain any weight back. In November, I quit smoking. And then because I quit smoking, I think I messed up something in my metabolism or whatever, but I gained a bunch of weight back. So I started taking lean again, and now I'm back down. It is a great product. I can't recommend it enough. Fantastic. Takelean.com, promo code Badlands.
All right. Man, there was something I was about to say. Oh, I saw a thing yesterday about those shots, and it was saying that like people are seeing like muscle and bone deterioration like 150% faster than normal. That's nuts, man.
Yeah.
Like I've got some family members that I found out are taking those, and I was pissed. I was furious at them. Like, what are you thinking? Especially considering my stepdad was taking them, and he's a pharmacist, and he was like, and he's 80, and he's like, yeah, I'm done with it. He's a diabetic though, so I think he was taking it more for that, you know, aspect of it. But now they're just like tacking. Christy was talking about this yesterday. Now they're just tacking everything onto it. Like every issue known to man, you now can solve with these stupid shots. So it's like,
yeah. Fringe Minority says, as Brian is drinking a toxic energy drink.
I know. Only my coffee in time. I ran out of time to get to my coffee. So,
yeah.
All right.
And shout out to the YouTube audience over there. It's good to see you guys. Please hit the like button. Helps us out. And anywhere you're watching, please hit the like button.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and our guest is here. So let's go ahead and bring on our guest to talk to you. Yesterday, we mentioned the next installment from Nick Shirley, who exposed wonderfully the fraud that was running rampant throughout Minneapolis and Minnesota and the surrounding areas. He's now moved on to California, something we thought was most likely the next, the next step in this progress. And so we're going to bring up here Miss Amy Reichert to talk about what's going on out there in California. Amy, how are you doing?
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to see you. I had the opportunity to meet Amy on Sunday. Shout out to Political Caviar, Jared Basso, who I was doing his show, his radio show on Sunday, and he had Amy on at the beginning to do the Reichert report, talking about incredible, viewpoint discrimination stories about students and all kinds of things, and mentioned that you were involved with Nick Shirley, months of work, had to wait a long time for this to come out, kind of on the edge of your seat to see the finished product. And when I heard the story, I was like, oh man, you got to come on with Brian and I. So we're so happy you're here.
Great to be here.
So just real quick, Amy, I see founder of Restore San Diego in your handle there. You want to tell us a little bit about what you guys do over there?
So it all started with Reopen San Diego. I'm one of the co-founders, and we pushed back against the passports that they were trying to do. Oh, that's right. We're on Rumble. I can actually say that word.
Yeah.
Yes, we fought back against vaccine passports, vaccine mandates, and we filed a federal lawsuit against the city of San Diego when they tried to fire all of our cops and firefighters, and even passed a law at city council saying that if you didn't get the COVID shot, you couldn't hold elected office. And we won in federal court. So thank God those days are behind us, although sometimes I have PTSD flashbacks like it happened yesterday. And now what we're trying to do is restore San Diego.
Let's play this clip here. This is from the Nick Shirley video. And this was probably, I mean, the whole thing is absolutely shocking, but seeing something like this is not just shocking on a financial scale, but also on a, humanity level right here. Let me play this clip.
Can we talk to your teacher? Is your teacher there? So this is the first child we've ever encountered at one of these daycares. There's 2 kids out here right now, and we're going to see if we can talk to the
licensee. It is, according to this paperwork, Shukri Jama.
Can we talk to the adult?
He is not here.
Not here.
Yeah.
So you guys all by yourself?
Yeah. Look at the door.
No one's here.
No one is here. No one is not here.
Okay, so you guys are all by yourself?
Okay. I can see by myself.
Yeah, okay, that's
Dog?
concerning. No one's watching those children, and they're all by themselves.
My heart is breaking right now. I can't. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and what makes you so emotional as a mother, seeing that those kids are just out by themselves?
Seeing the kids all by themselves. It's supposed to be a licensed daycare, and there's no adult anywhere. What is going on?
And the crazy thing.
So, I mean, that's shocking right there. That daycare is receiving, state and federal funding in order to do that, and the kids are just sitting out in the walkway. I mean, anybody could walk by and just snatch them up, do whatever.
And what people don't know is what happened behind the scenes. So with Nick Shirley and I, there was a LA Times freelance photographer who was documenting everything that was going on. And then as we were leaving the scene and we were trying to get help for those 2 kids, that's when we realized that the community, and yes, it was people who were Somali, had surrounded our vehicle that we were trying to leave in, and we were able to actually get into the car and then leave. And I just want to say it's crazy times when a 23-year-old citizen journalist, Nick Shirley, has to have $10,000 worth of security just to do an investigation in San Diego.
Yeah, Amy, take us back to the beginning of this, how you got involved with it. And I know from the time you started working on this to the time where you're actually out, visiting places, there's a ton of work that happens in between. Can you tell us a little bit about what this process was like?
I'm a state licensed private investigator in California. I've had my license since 1999, and I was really inspired when I saw what Nick Shirley was doing in Minnesota and exposing what was going on in ghost daycares. And what he was able to do was to search through state records. So this wasn't this wasn't Nick Shirley making these allegations of ghost daycares. It was the state of Minnesota. So I just replicated that process right here in California. I started alphabetically. I never narrowed or focused on any particular race, religion, or person of national identity or origin. I simply went alphabetically, and I saw patterns that mirrored Minnesota within the first hour of me searching. And I found 3 ghost daycares right off the bat.
Wow. I have to ask the question because there's a ton of people in the chat asking, did you guys call the authorities, CPS, anything for those kids?
So we were able to secure the children with an adult. And all I have to say is we literally had to leave. And yes, calls were made to law enforcement.
Excellent.
Amy, when you see the video, like Nick puts out here, and obviously he's trying to compress it and shrink it down for something that's consumable by people. And even then, 40 minutes, you're sitting on the edge of the seat to what he's going to, pull out next in this. How broad is this in California? Like, what do you think the scope? Because Nick is I think this is just Los Angeles, I believe.
This is San Diego, California. And specifically, the hot spots were San Diego and the entire state of California, as well as El Cajon. So we actually saw bigger fraud patterns in San Diego and El Cajon than even Los Angeles, which is triple the population of the county of San Diego.
So in the video, for those who might not have seen it, we didn't talk about it yesterday because we knew Amy was going to be coming on today. There's really 2 facets that he focuses on here, and the daycare, and the other one was the hospice and home health care. And I was saying yesterday, on a post I had out on X that this is low hanging fruit for the federal government. This is something that should be easily able for them to catch and prosecute, or at least investigate and prosecute. And you have, situations here where, and again, not trying to disparage, but it seems a repeating thing where this is migrant communities that are doing this. And in Minnesota, the Somali community, I think in the hospice, it was the Armenian community, and, not one particular, community over another, but what do we have to do to get something done about this?
I think that's a fair question. And I think you have to look back to who was in the last administration. Well, that was Joe Biden. And what they did regarding fraud was they cut the amount of investigators who were investigating fraud. And they made it easier for people to access these benefits. Now, what's the reason for that? Perhaps there's some kind of suicidal empathy going on, like, oh, we just want to make it easier and not harder for people to access benefits. But the fact of the matter is, President Trump yesterday signed an executive order in the Oval Office with J.D. Vance by his side, establishing the fraud task force. And what they're going to be doing is they're going to be using AI. That's a tool that I used as well to search through daycare records. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more prosecutions. The Assistant Attorney General, Bill Asaley in California, he quote tweeted Nick Shirley, and he said, arrests are on the way. So, what was this really all about? Why was fraud so easy? Why didn't the federal government have simple safeguards during Biden? Why did it take a Trump administration for this to happen? And I think what it all boils down to is, yes, I think there were some political motives wanting to make sure that benefits were available to people who they thought would vote for them. But also, you have to remember, a lot of the recipients of these are middlemen who receive the federal and state taxpayer money, and that's the non-government organizations. And of course, what we're seeing in the news is these non-government organizations are turning around and funding protests and riots, according to some people that are exposing this.
And attacking the people that are exposing the fraud, right? So I noticed, so who has the executive power in the state of California to really get the ball? President Trump signed federal order yesterday, right? Executive order from his federal authority yesterday. Gavin Newsom has the authority to do something about this in the state of California. And what do we see? Well, we see the press office putting out stuff like this, mimicking Nick Shirley. Hey, can I see your kids? And Nick responded, you do realize I'm trying to help America eliminate fraud and waste, right? No need to try and make me look like the bad guy for exposing fraud. People are over it. Start working for the people and not against them. And I think that's the sentiment, right? That's definitely what I our audience, the people here. I'm in Colorado. We talked about this on Sunday. We're in a dead heat for most communist kind of existence from a state standpoint. But the people are over it. The government turning around and making it about the people that are exposing the government, because there are Somalis and American citizens engaging in widespread fraud. But ultimately, if the government was enforcing the rules instead of relaxing them, if they were protecting the resources and being good stewards of the power and resources that the people have entrusted them with, we wouldn't have these problems. Why do you think that is? That we see, because it's not just in California, and it's not just on the issue of fraud. We see this in voting and in other areas where the people who are attempting to get to the truth are demonized by the people who are the beneficiaries or enablers of the fraud.
I can tell you some inside information. You're hearing it first. Gavin Newsom's going to be sued over that meme. That meme was put out by the governor's press office. That's an official X account, and it's run with our taxpayer dollars. Brandon and Izzy, they are on Governor Newsom's staff, and they're paid with our tax dollars to put out reprehensible defamation against anyone who is questioning the system. And anyone who's been in the political arena for any time, and that includes you guys, thank you for everything that you do. You know that when you stand up for something like, hey, I want my kids to be able to go back sooner to school, and I don't want our schools to be shut down for so long. Oh, you're a neo-Nazi.
Sure.
Oh, that's white supremacy. I mean, these are all things that we were called right here in California. And I've been called a Nazi the past few years for wanting to reopen businesses and for standing against vaccine mandates. And that would come as a huge shock to the rabbi that bat mitzvahed me in 1983 that I'm a Nazi. So they don't even care who they name call. It's just that is their playbook.
Yeah, they've diluted those terms down to the point where they mean absolutely nothing. I was saying, I think it was last week, I was like, in 2015, if somebody called you a racist, that's like a big deal. Like you're like, no, I'm not racist. Now it's just like, okay, who cares? It doesn't even matter anymore because they've broadened that term to mean everything that they don't particularly like. Amy, let me ask you. So you were talking a little bit about the NGOs there. Are the fraud that you're seeing in these daycares, the alleged fraud, is it coming directly from the government, or is there an NGO aspect to this as well?
Great questions. And yeah, these are red flags that we're finding in the state records. And here's how the money flows. So there's federal tax dollars for daycare that flow to the state. And then there's billions of dollars available just in California alone. And then that money flows to the county level to gatekeepers, non-government organizations, nonprofits. And in San Diego County, that's two. That's the YMCA of San Diego and Child Care Development Associates of San Diego. What's interesting, when you look at these NGOs, you will see that the Child Development Associates of San Diego, under the Biden administration, they started off with a budget of $100 million. And by the time the Biden administration was over, their budget doubled to $220 million. And when you look at how they're funded, well, they are 99.6% government subsidized. So then they will then pay these individual daycares. And these individual daycares can simply just submit like, oh, well, this is how many kids were enrolled, and here's how many kids were there. Pinky swear that's how many kids were there. And last year in 2024, the Department of Justice convicted Mohammed Muridi Muhammad in San Diego. And yes, he just happened to be a Somali gentleman. And there were also four co-defendants. And here's how the scam worked. And I don't even have to say alleged fraud. He was convicted. He was sentenced to 27 months in federal prison, where he is right now. He has to pay back $3.7 million in restitution. He said he had 150 kids in his UMI Learning Center. And he even had an arrangement with parents who were getting a kickback, according to federal law enforcement, of $200 a month. So the parents were in on it too. And this is all happening under Gavin Newsom's watch.
So the parents, just to be clear, the parents were getting paid to send their kids to daycare.
That is 100% correct. And that's not me saying it. That's the federal government saying it.
Wow. Now we have, Amy, we have a very, very engaged and active audience. How can somebody start doing a type of, open record information? How can somebody start doing an investigation into things like this in their community?
So I would just say that be responsible when you do this, and make sure that you thoroughly review all the documents. You're really going to have to put on your investigator's cap. You don't have to have a PI license to do this. The information is available. You can go to the California state website and you can download every single record for the state of California, and it will show things like unannounced visits from state inspectors. And it's really important that you read every single report carefully, because here's one thing that people can make a mistake. So, for example, you can look at a daycare and you can see how they had 39 kids enrolled. And you can see when the state showed up in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, for example, that there were 0 kids. So the places that Nick Shirley and I knocked on the doors of, and there were some learning centers in strip malls, and there were other places that were actually operating out of homes. These weren't just places that, oh, they just had one oopsie where there were 0 kids, because that can happen, right? There might be an Easter break, for example, or Christmas break, and you really have to be careful before you point any fingers. So the list that I compiled was after hundreds of hours of research, and I called them the dirty dozen. These were places that the state had visited up to 9 times and had numerous health and safety code violations, things like not having enrollment records they were cited for, not having a roster, not having a parent emergency contact information, not having infant sleep logs. And when you look at all of those things, is it conclusive proof that they are committing fraud and it's a ghost daycares? It is an indication of fraud. So you just have to be very, very careful. And just remember that we aren't the judges. We aren't the juries. We are not prosecutors. We are citizen journalists. Here is the research that we're doing that the state really should be doing, and we're bringing some sunshine to it.
Yeah, it's such a great point to remember that, it's not for us to judge or prosecute or convict. It is for us to shine the light, and that's really important. I'll tell you the part of the video, and I don't know if you were there for this part, but it made me very uncomfortable, like feeling like Nick and the other guy that he was with were in danger, was when there was that adult daycare complex, and like every place in it was, or many of the places in it were adult daycares, and there's really expensive cars in the kind of courtyard area of it, and it seemed like the guy that they were talking to sort of was amused by them at first, and then realized that they might be a threat, and it seemed, I was concerned about their safety. What was that like for you? Not that specific. I don't know what knowledge you have for that, but the safety aspect of it. What was that like for you?
Well, I can tell you, it's a very interesting time to be alive and to be able to do a ride along with Nick Shirley, who on our first day of going out and knocking on doors at strip malls where learning centers were located, we had to have 3 security guards with us, bodyguards. And when you looked at them, they looked like they were straight out of Central Casting. Seriously, all just ex-military looking types. And trust me, we absolutely needed them that day, because word spread pretty quickly. And the same rapid response network that the anti-ICE activists are deploying throughout the country, they were using to alert people about Nick Shirley being in San Diego. And there was this one influencer who posted and said, Nick Shirley's in San Diego, you know what to do. And when you looked at the comments, it was horrifying. There was one comment that said he needs to be Charlie Kirked, and his mom needs to play the part of Erica. If that doesn't shock you right there, that is literally what's going on when you go out and you try to shed a little light about what's going on. You're not just called racist. You're not just called Nazi. Literally, they want you dead.
Yeah.
That opens up a whole new facet to this, beyond just, the direct implications of the fraud and, what could be charged on that. But if they have a network, a sprawling network like this, and they're, alerting each other and calling for violence and assassinations, I mean, you're starting to look at like a criminal network that is, entrenched in one another, and potentially like a racketeering investigation into this. I mean, this is like a criminal organization. I know in the daycare thing, you said there's some mafias that are running these types of things. But I mean, that's a big, I knew they were, alerting each other, but I thought it was something like, just like calling your neighbor and saying, hey, they might come to you next. But if they've got signal chats and networks like that, that's a big investigation right there.
I certainly hope so. And I've looked into what California law says about death threats because over the years, I have received my fair share of death wishes and threats. And the standard is very high in California. It has to be very specific, including time and place. This was regarding something completely different. This was a few months ago. I had posted about a local meeting in San Diego, and somebody commented from an anonymous account against me. They said, "We'll see you November 10th. We have your picture on our wall, Amy, and you better be wearing a helmet." What am I supposed to think about a comment like that? I take that to my local PD, and they tell me that's not specific enough. So that's part of the problem, at least here in California.
Yeah, when we were doing canvassing for the election, we were pretty under the radar until the Secretary of State started posting press releases about, unauthorized voter vigilantes and whatnot, and then similar kinds of threats. Not really on social media because we weren't doing anything on social media about it. There was no we didn't put out. We were really trying to get a record that we could take into a court of law and take to authorities. But once the what I would refer to as the DSA, on the ground army. Yeah, those
Democratic
guys,
Socialists of America.
Yeah, they're who run my state, in my opinion. They're similar kind of stuff that you said, and we brought all of that into a court. And our counterclaim for threats and intimidation and whatnot dismissed. So all of those threats are sitting there. Maybe one day. It's all still in litigation, so maybe one day. But the nastiness, and it's crazy because we're not really partisan on Badlands. The political ideas kind of run the spectrum. But to see I'm going to use the term aisle, even though I don't really believe one exists, on the other side of the aisle, to see just the rabid, visceral, hateful protection of the state committing fraud it's mind blowing. It's like, you guys have to be being paid. And I don't have, the evidence to make that assertion outright. But in my opinion, that kind of reaction, it is intended to intimidate you and shut you up and make you too afraid to go out and do any more work on this. And it's in protection of a money laundering scheme, a fraud and money laundering scheme for state entities. What is that? What Americans are those?
For me, when I decided to start speaking out, it was late 2020, and I live in La Mesa, California, and we had the Black Lives Matter protests turn into riots just 2 miles from where I lived, and 3 buildings were burned down. And I went out the very next day, and I stood right in the center of 3 buildings that were still burning at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then the rioters were leaving at that point. And then later on, all of these church ministries started coming and cleaning up. And I took part in that. And I remember a couple weeks later, just kind of like standing in my kitchen. And up to that point, I had remained quiet about my thoughts about the lockdowns at that point. And everybody remembers how public health officials went from, if you participate in a reopen protest, you're a super spreader of COVID, to, oh, no. If you're burning down a building or protesting for BLM, you're not spreading COVID. And when I was standing there in the middle of my kitchen, I remember feeling powerless. And it was in that very moment that I decided that I could no longer live a quiet life of desperation. I knew it was going to be more painful to speak out, but I also realized, you know what, I cannot continue to remain silent. That is a far, far more painful way. to go through life. And so I think everybody just has to make a decision, because the playbook for these people is there are no rules.
Yeah.
They will call you a racist, a Nazi, a conspiracy theorist, an insurrectionist, an election denier, a COVID denier, just for having very simple mainstream views. And my overall message just to anybody that's listening is, when they accuse you of being a racist, just reject their premise.
Yeah.
Don't go into defense mode and go, I'm not racist because ...
Yeah.
Right? Just reject it entirely and just go on the offense instead of going on the defense, because that's what they want.
Yeah, I love what you said about the life of quiet desperation, because if and it's, you know, you don't have to get out into the street and go track down, you know, go into the most dangerous neighborhoods to find fraud. You did that, and our chat is calling you a hero, and I think that they're right. Putting yourself in harm's way to you know, do the work of the people is a heroic thing, particularly right now. But when you say, I'm not going to go out, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to associate with those people, I'm not going to say what I really think because I don't want to be called names, or even worse, you know, I don't want to be taken into court for things I say, which is something that happens in our country. When you do that, they win without a fight. And we cannot let these communists who are you know, authoritarians, these authoritarians who are you know, their end stage. They've had their kind of long march through the institutions. They've had their quiet kind of erosion of our rights and dividing us and destabilizing our nation. We cannot let them we cannot let them finish the job without a fight. So people need to stand up and be brave. And I'm super grateful for you for what you've done and for coming on. Appreciate you.
Well, you know what, if I may just close with this, it really is, if I may say so, it is a spiritual battle.
100%.
And the thing of the matter is once you realize that, like, the stakes are even greater. And so again, going back to that moment where I'm standing in the middle of my kitchen, I literally just cried out to God. And I said, I know I'm supposed to do something, God, show me what to do. And literally, like, my next baby step, I started speaking out on my own private Facebook. I didn't have an Instagram with 90,000 followers like I do now. I didn't have an X with 70,000 followers. I just had my own personal Facebook with people that I had known since high school.
Yeah.
Right? So start somewhere
Yeah.
is where I'm encouraging people to do, because the stakes are so high.
Amy, real quick, one last question. Has anybody within either the Trump administration or the Gavin Newsom or your local administration reached out to you, given what you're exposing and your, you know, your like being a licensed private investigator? The evidence you've uncovered has to have, you know, more weight behind it than, say, you know, just an average, you know, normal citizen that finds this. Has anybody reached out about investigating this?
Well, Gavin Newsom responded through his governor's press office X account. He called me Donald Trump's stooge after I was on a Fox nightly show, and I was retweeted by the president of the United States. And he also disabled several of the search fields on the state website to search daycares. That's the response I got from Gavin Newsom.
Wow.
As far as hearing from Trump, he did retweet me. But I've not heard from the president personally.
That certainly sounds like obstruction. If you're exposing something and then they go and block the means for you to continue that investigation with public information, that is textbook obstruction right there.
And those things are, you know, the access to those records and whatnot should be governed by statute. No? Can he just disable it?
You can still get them. You can download all of the data and you can search one by one. I was really fortunate that people smarter than me came along, and we used AI tools to look through the entire database of California daycares, and we were able to do search terms like no children present. But even with that, you still have to inspect the records one by one, because just like my advising any potential citizen journalist earlier is, yes, it can say no children present, but then the next sentence could read because they were on Christmas break. So, just what I would just encourage anybody is, no, you don't have to start off by putting yourself in harm's way and exposing hospices or daycares, but start somewhere.
Amen. Amy, thank you so much for joining. I want to real quick highlight here. If you're not following Amy for San Diego on X, and her website is restoresandiego.org. And I don't know what your Instagram is, Amy, if you want to share that.
Same handle, Amy FOR San Diego.
All right.
Excellent. Thanks, Amy, so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much.
God bless. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Yeah, Artsy Joan in the chat says this is the homeland, and I think that's such a great point. Like, that actually defending the homeland is the fight for it. And yes, there's military borders, all that kind of stuff that's defending the homeland. We all need to be afraid of the terrorist attacks, right? It's certainly something we're but this corruption that has creeped into every institution and every process, and the American authorities who are enabling it and obstructing justice for the exposure of fraud and waste of taxpayer resources. This is the fight. This is the homeland.
Absolutely. Great work by Amy.
She's fantastic.
He was fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stay on kind of the same kind of concept here. And last week we talked about JJ Smith in San Francisco. Okay, so this is separate from what we're about to show you, and also where San Diego, where Amy and Nick Shirley were working. But James O'Keefe put this out yesterday, and this is along the same lines of what JJ Smith uncovered, more street journalism, and people, NGOs and other groups out there paying homeless people, poor people, for signatures and to register to vote. Check this out. By the way, is James O'Keefe not like the what an outfit? That's him in the green shirt.
Nice.
Pretending to be a homeless person.
Now we're gonna give you $2. We just need 14 signatures.
The petitioner Brenda Brown hands cash money to the homeless person, not only for signing the California ballot initiative, but also as payment for them to register to vote.
Now, because you haven't registered, I need to register you so I can get paid too. I'm paying you guys, I need to get paid. Come on.
That is a federal felony. And it didn't just happen once, it happened over and over and over again. We personally witnessed and covertly filmed this happening at least 28 times over the span of our investigation, and that is just in Los Angeles. Many of the homeless have zero understanding of what it is that they're actually signing.
But what is that petition for? There's a petition for?
The petitioners instruct the homeless to enter made-up addresses like Pinocchio Lane.
Do I put it in my address? Yeah, just put up. You live on Pinocchio Lane. Oh, you can just take it.
Oh, good.
And all of this occurring just outside the front doors of shelters and NGOs such as Weingart Center, which have received hundreds of millions of dollars in government money. One Weingart employee tells us when and where to find the illegal cash exchanges for signatures outside, and says the cash being given out is coming from a higher source.
Do you know if they provide the money that they're handing out?
Yeah,
the company
does. When they give the money out, they got to go back and tally up if they stealing the money or not. So they got to have signatures. Most of them be right across the street under that tree. You can check with them Monday through Friday.
While another Weingart employee advises the homeless on how to practice plausible deniability and ignorance of the law.
See, they said ignorance is not excuse for the law. But a lot of times I have to say I didn't know. I had no idea.
Oh, that would be what he should say.
Yeah. The petitioners orchestrate an elaborate pyramid scheme of unregistered petition circulators.
If I were to hire you, you would be under me. Yes. I'm under my son, I'm under him, and you under me. So it's like a pyramid game. And really, I don't need you, you need me. I don't need you.
One of the petitioners threatens to attack one of our journalists.
Go down the street, bro, before we move you down the street. I'll knock you out looking right at me. Bro, why are you trying to be like that, bro? Man won't knock your ass out. Bitch ass nigga, don't come over here again. I'm gonna beat your ass.
And an employee of the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority records not the fraud, but the people exposing it.
That you okay? Why are you filming us? I'm with the LAPD.
You know it's a crime to say you're with the police when you're not.
No, I'm not with the LAPD.
Well, that's what you just said 2 minutes ago. Why did you lie?
As the NGOs.
So you guys get the point there. It goes on and on and on. But I mean, that's Los Angeles. That's not San Francisco, where JJ Smith last week was finding the same exact thing. Like, what are you doing, guys? I mean, it's right there on the streets in broad daylight.
Yeah, and you know, when we look at on the other end of it, right, the voting results in an election, and we canvassed, right, and 8 to 10%, 8 to 11% in the state of Colorado was questionable. Can't say it's fraud, right? We don't know. We don't have enough information to know whether it's fraud. But what did we find? We found fake addresses. You know, people registered where they don't, where there's not even a building, right? Fields, cross streets, intersections, registered to vote in storage unit addresses, registered to vote at Arby's or at Sam's Club. And when you see this side of it, it's like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then consider that these, a lot of these, based on the information available, get out the vote organizations, their incentive is to register as many people as possible. They don't care about eligibility. They're not checking eligibility. If you check eligibility, you're engaging in voter suppression. You know, how dare you question whether or not someone is a citizen? You can't ask that question. So just register. The incentive structure supports getting as many people onto the rolls as possible, and inflated voter rolls enable the entire election fraud machine.
Absolutely. I mean, these homeless people are not likely to vote themselves, right? They're just looking to get the $2, the $4, whatever it is.
Well, where are they going to get the ballot if they're putting in a fake address, Brian? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And that's why, you know, like when we go back to Arizona and Liz Harris and James Knox and the works that they did over there and many others, you know, I had a whistleblower in Colorado in following the 2020 election that was, you know, telling me as a veteran, he was going through homeless shelters. He was down and out. And he went to a few of these shelters and he said, you go into the homeless shelter and they had stacks of ballots. And they were just like, yeah, grab one and fill it out. And they had mail people coming almost daily, grabbing these ballots and bringing them in. And this is how you perpetuate the fraud. You continue to inflate the voter rolls, like you said, by adding fake names. I mean, these are when you're telling somebody fill it out Pinocchio Lane, or like the JJ Smith video where they're telling you, hey, sign this as Carol Sanderson. And the lady's like, oh, okay, Carol Sanders. That's obviously not her.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man. And so O'Keefe in that video, he goes on to say that this is all over the place down here. And I'm going to continue putting out videos every single day until somebody addressed this. Bill Asiley, who Amy alluded to, I accidentally pulled up Asiley's response to O'Keefe, not to Nick Shirley, but said, we're aware of this. We're investigating. We can't talk about an ongoing investigation. So yeah. Hopefully, and just one last thing, Ash, the one thing I learned in when I was writing the article that JJ Smith, what he uncovered, these NGOs, the organizations, the PACs, and everything else that are responsible for doing this, at least initiating this, they have plausible deniability, because it's like they're like the shell company. Oh, they pass through a bunch of shell companies in getting to the ground level people. And so they have, consultation firms who goes to another consultation firm who goes out to people on the streets and subcontracts with them. And then those subcontractors go out there and start the pyramid scheme that they were talking about there. So by the time investigators get there, who gets hit? The ground level person on the street gets arrested. And they're like, look, we caught this person doing this. But you ignore the fact that it goes 3 layers above that. Oh, well, the NGO didn't know that this was going on. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
You
I also don't believe that. I don't believe you.
You have to have some accountability for what you're doing.
Yeah, if you're getting distribution of taxpayer funds, you have there's a stewardship that has to take place. You have to be a good steward of that. And if you're committing fraud, I don't think there should be plausible deniability in that exchange. I think you roll up all of them. But we've seen that So somebody in the chat said, get rid of no excuse mail-in balloting. And I think that that is a great point to make on this, because the inflated voter rolls feed who gets ballots.
Yes.
And when you have no excuse mail-in voting, like we do here in my state, it means that you have a ton of ballots in the ecosystem with no checks on eligibility. And the state will come back and say, as they have done, well, there's so many checks on it. So it doesn't matter if, people like Rock the Vote or Scott Pressler register a whole bunch of people that aren't eligible to vote. We'll check, it'll get caught in all of the checks before the ballots ever go out because there's so many checks. Well, that's, it's true on paper. They check it against a whole bunch of different government databases, but does that result in cleaned up voter rolls? Not in my experience, not in the canvassing that we did, not in the Judicial Watch versus Griswold lawsuit that found that there were issues and she entered a consent decree. And that's the problem, because you have just what I refer to it as just dropping ballots from the sky, just papering the state in ballots. And the right to vote is so important that you can't question anyone doing it. That is weaponized. She called it suicidal empathy, weaponized empathy. It's so important. This is, you and I talk about this all the time on Friday on Why We Vote, and all shows are Why We Vote now. But the prioritization of access over accuracy and integrity is what has led to this. And the only thing holding that together is weaponized empathy. We have got to get over being called racist voter suppressors by pointing out that only eligible Americans should be able to vote. American citizens, people that are invested in this country and have the actual lawful right to vote, real lawful American votes, as Chris says.
Amen. I'm going to since we got into the universal mail-in balloting, I'm going to call a slight little audible. I had a ton of election stories because, like Ash said, Sawavna, whatever we're going with, all shows are Why We Vote now. But I am going to hit a sponsor real quick before we get into, we'll talk about the SAVE Act here in just a second, because we do have some updates on that as well. But before that, we'll hit this sponsor, and let me get this pulled up here. And there we go. All right, guys. A little inside scoop many creators are talking about behind the scenes is actually one of the reasons that we use Rumble. They made a way to super chat creators so that we get paid immediately and without any fees. YouTube and Twitch can take up to 50% when you tip creators. This method will take none. That's right. The platform takes 0 fees, and we keep nearly 100% whatever you guys decide to send us. You can super chat with Bitcoin, Tether, US dollars, USD, or even Tether Gold stablecoins. The tip will show up directly in the Rumble chat, which we'll always do our best to read. And all you need to do is download the Rumble wallet on the App Store and send the tips to your favorite creators. You can go to wallet.rumble.com, or you can download the app directly from the App Store. Seriously, it's an amazing way to get rid of the middleman and help the creator economy. Shout out to Rumble for making the disruptive technology. This is a movement that is funded by the listeners, essentially, so we don't have interests like, pharmaceutical companies or anything like that driving any type of content moderation or whatnot. So if you guys want to check it out, Rumble, wallet.rumble.com. And thank you so much to Rumble. Let's go ahead and jump.
Thank you to Rumble for allowing us to speak.
Absolutely. And yeah, we went through this hard in the 2020 and 2021 era. And since then, Amy caught it right away. Oh, we're on Rumble. I can say vaccines. Yes, you can. All right. So let's play. Got 2 clips real quick before we get into the meat and potatoes of the SAVE Act. Save America Act. Base Mike Lee on X put this out.
It's been about 2 years since Chip Roy and I wrote the SAVE Act, which later became the Save America Act. Tomorrow, this is going to come to fruition as the Save America Act comes to the floor of the United States Senate. I invite all within the sound of my voice who would like this bill to become law to reach out to as many people as possible, friends, neighbors, especially United States senators who might listen to you. Ask them, please get this passed. Tell them we need to invoke the talking filibuster in the United States Senate. No zombie filibuster will suffice on this one. We've got to turn to this bill. We've got to debate it. And we've got to stay on the bill until it becomes law. There can be no surrender. There can be no ifs, ands, or buts. There can be no cheap imitations here. The Republic is on the line. Let's get this done.
All right. So I mean, I love his you know, his strength in what he's saying, his stamina in taking this the whole way. Unfortunately, I don't know what's going to happen with this bill. Do you want to comment on that before we get into John Thune and what his kind of reverse course here?
Only to say that it should be fatal to their credibility if they fail to pass this. 83% of Americans support the Save America Act. That tells you something about where the American mind is as it pertains to real elections and the integrity of the vote and making sure that only American citizens, eligible voters, can vote in elections. And so if the Senate decides, I saw a video of a Lindell TV reporter chasing Lisa Murkowski down the hallway, trying to get her on the record. And she was saying, well, this is going to disenfranchise rural Alaskans, so I can't vote for it the way it is. But the reality is that it's not your call, right? Like, the American people are telling you what they want. There's a fringe minority of Americans that thinks that voter integrity is suppression. The majority of Americans from all parties, from all demographic backgrounds, think that we should have Americans only voting in American elections. So if the Senate fails to pass this, we should all be asking why we need the Senate in the first place. And just final point on that. The people that were begging to pass this legislation are the primary beneficiaries of it not being passed.
So to your point there about the Senate existence and why we need it, I want to get to that when we get into the article, because I think it didn't hit me until I was reading the article about this morning, how masterfully President Trump handled this. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second when we get into the article. But I do want to play this clip here from Senate Majority Leader, quote unquote leader, John Thune. Kind of now all of a sudden he wants to rally the troops. And I mean, granted, he's been like a fence sitter the whole time. Like, well, I'll bring it to the floor, but it's not going to pass. Check this out.
I think, as everybody knows, we are looking forward to having an important battle on the floor of the Senate this week on the Save America Act. And obviously, the message that came over from the House includes a couple of key components, one of which is that you have to prove citizenship to be able to register to vote in this country. And the second component is that you actually have to show an ID to vote in this country. We think those are both things that are overwhelmingly popular all across this country, no matter what your political party is. And to sort of illustrate, I think, how this issue is something that a lot of people resonate with and connect to, is the fact that pretty much everything you do in your daily life involves showing an ID. You know, whether it's opening a bank account, getting a hotel room, picking up prescription drugs. You need a card in many cases just to get into a library. I mean, these are things that are just basic, fundamental aspects of our everyday life. We certainly ought to be able to apply them to something as important as voting in this country. And if you think about it, even the Democrats who are complaining loudly about this required a photo ID to get into the Democrat National Convention. And there are a number of our colleagues, Democrat.
All right, we can stop there. He does like these, like, oh, I'm just going to regurgitate the talking points that everybody else has been saying for the last 2 years since they introduced this bill. And somehow maybe that will gain me favor with Republicans so I don't go back to South Dakota and get my ass kicked in a primary or, in the election. I don't think he'll lose the election, but you know what I mean? You're the benefactor or the beneficiary, of the elections. You don't have to worry about that. You're going to win.
And I reject the premise that Democrats are preventing this from happening, because if Republicans could get their shit together, it would be done.
Exactly.
And that's the real uncomfortable truth that people don't want to, wrestle with. It's much easier to yell at Democrats. I live in a blue state, and I have the temptation to blame the things on the Democrat. And here, even like in the United States Senate, the margin is way tighter than it is here. So the temptation to just blame Democrats is even, it's even more pronounced. But that's where they want us. They want our minds in that, cheering for the sport team kind of aspect of this, and it's an election year, and so they use that is the, you know, it's the most emotional time we have as a collective society is during an election year, and all of the stimulus is intended to keep us fighting each other about ideas. But again, 83% of Americans support this, according to, you know, widespread polling on the matter. And because polls are fake, I would argue it's probably more. I'd argue it's probably more of the American electorate that supports this. We've seen enough evidence that our voter rolls and the access to our elections has been corrupted and expanded beyond what's allowable. The fact that this even needs to be passed, right, in the first place, that we need this law, that this isn't already a part of the law, that only eligible Americans can vote in American elections, is a big red flag for where we're at. But to watch the red versus blue sports team go at it on an 83% issue really tells you a lot about where we are and where these institutions are, particularly with regards to their credibility.
So here's the article. Fox News: GOP triggers marathon Senate fight to expose Dems' opposition to Trump-backed voter ID bill. Senate Republicans successfully launched their floor takeover to put the Senate Democrats on record against the Trump-backed voter ID legislation. They're already on record. I mean, we don't need them on the official Senate record. They've already been talking about this in the media for the last 6 months, so whatever. It's a move to shift the spotlight from internal GOP division onto Senate Democrats, who are ultimately withholding the needed votes to pass the bill. Quote, "Not a single Democrat will support the SAVE Act. It's a radical bill," says Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. "And if Republicans try to burn time on this legislation here on the floor, we will oppose them for as long as it takes." The multi-day marathon debate on the bill wasn't without its hiccups. Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, as Ash said, joined Senate Democrats to block the legislation. Tom Tillis from North Carolina, who is not running for re-election, threatened to do everything he could to block the bill and did not vote at all. So it was 51-48, I think. Quote, "If your senators don't support using the talking filibuster to pass the Save America Act, you might need to replace them," says Mike Lee on X. With the initial hurdle passed, the Senate will now begin the marathon debate and amendment process. Amendment votes will only come at the tail end of the floor battle and will require Republicans to take another procedural test that Democrats could block. Each amendment, which Republicans will control, has to hit a 60-vote threshold, meaning that none of the provisions that Trump wants to be attached to the bill will survive. Senator Eric Schmidt will head off the flurry of amendments with a package of add-ons that include Trump's desired modifications to the bill. Those include ending unsolicited mail-in ballots, with exception for military service, disability, illness, banning men from women's sports, and halting transgender surgery on minors. Halting mail-in ballots isn't a home run among Republicans, with many pushing back on a sweeping end to the practice. So first, for the Trump aspect, before we get to the Senate part, I was wondering when Trump came out and like kind of pivoted on the Save America Act and not pivoted, but expanded upon the Save America Act and added the transgender this and all that stuff to it.
Yeah.
I was like, why is he doing this? You're taking a bill that was already not popular among Democrats, but maybe could get across, maybe somehow. And now you're adding a bunch of stuff that's going to piss off Democrats even more. And so as I'm reading this now, it hit me. Those are all things now, amendments that they take to the floor, and they continue this process and drag this out and make the Democrats, push and push and push talk and talk and talk. And, this is a pseudo talking filibuster where they can go on as long as they want with the amendments and everything else. And it's not going to have the same effect as an actual talking filibuster, but it will have the same effect of pissing off Democrats and making them sit there and do nothing, which I'm all about our Senate doing nothing. So that's fine with me. But now it hit me why, he started making all those proposals and throw those amendments out there and just, really hold their feet to the fire and agitate the shit out of them. So that's.
Well, so is it then your assumption that he doesn't want it to pass?
No. He wants it to pass, but he wants those amendments to be noted and to put those on the record and to drag this thing out as long as possible. I think.
Okay. So why is that a priority of President Trump to drag this out as long as possible versus a clean? So my opinion on the, transgender thing, and I put this in the brief this morning, badlands.substack.com, is that illegitimate bodies can't pass legitimate legislation. It sounds like, and I, sort of quoted Chris Paul in spirit. If we pass the SAVE Act, we'll finally know who has the wee-wees and who has the hoo-has. That's kind of what those tweets, those posts to me sound like. Because if this was an earnest effort by the president to change the hearts and minds of senators, to convince them to pass a voter ID law, citizenship law, he would not be piling on things that he knows is going to make it harder for them to pass it. So my, kind of when I think beyond that, it's like, okay, so what is he doing? And I mean, all shows are why we vote now. This is not an earnest effort to pass a piece of legislation. I don't see how you would just antagonize. That's not how you're going to build a coalition of support to get something over the line. But then, of course, can an illegitimate body pass legitimate legislation? Or are we watching? It's, when you combine it with the Wii video game war videos that they've been putting out, and kind of the level of absurdity of some of the things that are coming out of the administration, what are they trying to say? Every single day there's new things that move me further along the thing. And somebody else was asking, or making the assertion, like they don't care the body, right, the Senate or the Congress more broadly, they don't care what the people think. And I think that's largely been true. But then what are we going to do about it? And if you think that it still does matter that the illegitimate body can pass legitimate legislation, then what you have to do is get loud. Because if elections are real, or if their outcomes are really impactful to our lives in the actual, then the pressure of the people does make a difference. If Lisa Murkowski, if all those rural Alaskans and other, the urban Alaskans came down on her like a ton of bricks, calls, letters, showing up where she is, how dare you say that this is going to disenfranchise us? Why are you diluting our elections? There was that old line, I think it was from the Q drops, of they're not going to be able to walk down the street, right? If the pressure of the people is it's the most potent weapon that we have. And so if you believe that this is the way to get this legislation through, to shore up our elections through legislation, then you cannot be silent. You have to be calling them every single day, in my opinion.
So again, to the point that you started with in the beginning there, this legislation, in my opinion, has always been doomed to fail. I think most people saw that. Unless you nuke the filibuster, which again, that was that something that they were ever willing to do? Was Murkowski ever going to be on board with that? Was McConnell? Was Susan Collins? Was all these people, were they ever going to be on board on that with that? No. So I think they realized no. Now they're in addition, and what I was saying about, dragging this out, that was just specifically in response to what's going on today and yesterday and for the rest of this week. But in the build up to it, as President Trump introduces that, 83% of the country, right, loves this bill, which would mean that, or supports this bill in its original form, the voter ID, the citizenship. So President Trump says, okay, well, how do we get to that 17% that's still lingering on this? Well, here's what we do. We make them realize that, hey, they actually do support this, but they're doing it because the Democrats don't, right? They're going along with their own party in this. And so what you do is you introduce things that their party would actually avidly fight back against, transgender, all of that stuff. And so now all these people are like, whoa, now you're adding transgender, this and that to it. Well, this is getting crazy now. And you're like, okay, we'll take those away. Now you in? And they're like, well, I guess now that you took that away, it's a mind trick. It's a Jedi mind trick, right? President Trump.
Well, yeah, I mean, the negotiation levers was kind of my first thought about why he was doing that, is so that they have things that they can, to give the Democrats wins, right? They have, but it's so on the nose. Like, is that what's that?
it is on the nose. It's a completely illegitimate body. And to the point that you made about they don't care about the people, this is kind of not an epiphany I had. I've stood by this for a long time, but I think this is a glaring example of why we need to abolish the 17th Amendment. Because, you know, the Senate, so you think about it this way, and the House has passed this bill many, many times. Okay, the House has passed this bill, and the House, not that I think they're any more legitimate than any other elected official. The House at least is like, hey, the people want this, like 85% House Republicans, at least a couple of the Democrats. The Senate's not supposed to operate that way. Right. The Senate is not supposed to be beholden to the individual of their state. They are supposed to. What's that?
To the parties.
They're beholden to the parties, but in the original context of the Constitution, the text of the Constitution, they were supposed to be beholden to the state legislatures, which is a representative of the state, the people's representative of the state. And so it's kind of these layers of representation. And so you have, the way it exists right now, the Senate goes out there and they say, hey, I'm voting no on this bill. And now in Florida, for example, you have 20 million people that are like, why are you doing that? They don't have to worry about that accountability. The people are going to hold an election. They're going to vote. And, when 20 million people vote, it's easy to pull off the fraud. What's not easy to pull off is when 28 people have to vote for you. And now all of a sudden you're beholden to those 28 people. And those 28 people as state legislators are on a different plane than the U.S. representatives and the U.S. Senate, because they're living in their community. A lot of your state legislators live next door to you, that kind of thing. Yeah. And so they actually have to look you in the eye if they say, oh, we're going to continue voting for Mitch McConnell as a state legislator for Senate. The 17th Amendment really jacked up the balance in this country of, the lower house being direct representation of the people, and the Senate being representative of the state, which is why you have 2 for each state. So that was just an epiphany I had when I was reading this.
Yeah, well, you're spot on. The 17th Amendment was the death blow to states' rights. But what happened with direct election, senators being elected directly by the people, and we see this in every state, regardless of which, uniparty dynamic is in play, red majority or blue majority, we see that the direct election by the people leads to greater power for the parties. The parties are the organizing function, and the parties don't care about the people. The parties on purpose, like here, we're going through caucus right now. I'm not a Republican, so I'm just watching the rhetoric and everything surrounding it. But with the precinct strategy that you and I have had Dan on the show before, Why We Vote, before, and talked about the precinct strategy. The parties keep those seats empty on purpose. They specifically make it hard for the people to obtain voting powers and seats of power within the party structure, because the parties are generally run by the lobbyists. And so it's these changes over time to the on-paper authorities and how those authorities are executed in the different bodies and in the different forums has centralized a lot of these powers in the hands of the parties. And the parties are the same entity. The donors that run that run the parties, in my opinion, based on the information available, the donors fund both sides. And the same like defense contractors and other lobbies, they fund both sides, but the parties exist to keep us fighting each other so that we don't actually turn our eyes to where the problem is and fight that. And it's a battle that really begins and ends in the mind of the Americans. Americans have to break those chains, wake up and step into their power. And I think you're right about repealing the 17th Amendment. I think we need to pass representation, or at least do something that reinforces the ratios in the House, because that's another part of this problem, right? Is that it's supposed to be 1 to 35,000 and it's 1 to 900,000, or I think it's 750,000. That's not representation, but we're told we have representation. And really, if you want to affect change, just go into the party, right? That's what we're told. The parties are the problem. I've been saying it since 2011 when I left the party.
The last thing I'll add to this is, just going back to talking about the 16th or the 17th, the 16th was also passed right around that same time. I think it was both in 1913 that they were ratified. But this is the whole concept of the Federal Reserve, the central bank control over this country. And like you were saying, the parties, you got to go into the party to change it, and we need to repeal the 17th. Well, that's the likelihood of that happening is that cat's out of the bag. It's not getting put back in. We're looking at the Cornyn-Paxton race right now in a primary, spending $100 million. That is $100 million that is being dispersed out to all sorts of entities, whether it's news outlets, whether it's, campaign, people that are working within the campaign. This is money that's being dispersed out to all these people. And granted, a lot of it is, I think, illegally laundered money, hashtag smurfing. But that's gonna be very difficult for them to ever put away. And the reason that they don't want that put away is because if you actually look at the state legislatures as they sit right now, state legislatures, not tours, I think right now it's like 28 GOP Republican dominant legislatures, which would give 56 senators. And then there's 4 states that have split legislatures, which would, put it very close to that 60 vote threshold to break a filibuster. And then they could actually get something done in this country, because you don't have, the stalling like they do with the Save America Act or with DHS funding, which I'm against, but a lot of people are for. So it's a system that is designed to maintain kind of that status quo and to go along to get along and just remain as it is.
Yeah. And I know that there's, some folks think that we're, flippant or irresponsible on the issues of, talking about the bodies being illegitimate. But I'm going to be honest, like, this is the question that I wrestle with the most is, can an illegitimate body pass legitimate election? It is 5.5 years since the 2020 election. We are definitely not supposed to still be talking about it. The people that won that fake election and every fake election since were, I think, certain that eventually the American people would move on, because we always do, right? Like every election has some sort of, allegation of fraud and sore loserism and all of those things. But the coalition to get the truth about 2020 has only grown since 2020. It has not shrunk. There are not people that thought the election was fake and now think elections are real. Not in their hearts, I don't think, maybe in their rhetorics. But when we're now 5.5 years later, coming up on the 6th year since 2020, in November, we're back in campaign season. People are back on campaign teams, and the red and blue jersey. Everybody's got their red or blue jersey on, and it's maddening, because we're asking the people benefiting from the system, the corrupted system, to fix the corrupted system, which will impact their benefits of the corrupted system. And this is the thing that I really struggle with. It keeps me up at night about, and I vote, right? And I openly support the candidates that I think are going to be change makers. Very rarely do I support incumbents. I can't think of one that I'm supporting in this upcoming cycle, because I want real elections. But I'm stuck in an illogical situation when I'm asking the people that benefit from the fraud to fix the fraud. And I don't know the answer. I feel like, President Trump keeps telling us that, President Trump operates in this bicameral space, right? He's the number one person telling us that elections are fake, and he's also telling us to vote. And to me, you and I have talked a whole bunch about this, but it's the most important battlefield that we have. And engaging in that is, I think we have to be a little bit bicameral about it. And it is, it is, but it is, yeah. I don't claim to have all the answers. I have very strong opinions. On this one, it keeps me up at night.
All right, we got one more election story, I promise. So yesterday we talked about Just the News and the Chinese, the Chinese infiltration that was kind of suggested. We've got a little bit of an update on that. And the justification that they had back in 2020, this is actually insane. From Just the News, U.S. Intel hid the Chinese 2020 election meddling from Trump because they opposed his policies. memo says. U.S. intelligence community analysts are saying were saying that they didn't want their intel used by, quote, that vulgarian in the Oval Office, end quote, to pursue policies towards China that they personally disagreed with. Analytic ombudsman Barry Zuloff conducted a review of the spy community's handling of Russian versus Chinese meddling efforts during the 2020 election. Among his conclusions was that intelligence analysts downplayed China's actions because they had disdain for the quote-unquote vulgarian Trump and did not want to support his policies and priorities of the Trump administration toward China, with which they personally disagree, quote unquote, personally disagree. This is not the only piece of evidence pointing to Chinese government election influence efforts. Much about the China's activities in 2020 still remain classified. Jump down here and says, Zuloff wrote, quote, given analytic differences in the way Russia and China analysts examine their targets, China analysts appeared hesitant to assess Chinese actions as undue influence or interference. These analysts appeared reluctant to have their analysis on China brought forward because they tended to disagree with the administration's policies, saying, in effect, I don't want our intelligence used to support those policies. Zuloff quoted an analyst working on the Chinese interference efforts, essentially saying that, quote, I don't want my analysis go into the White House where that vulgarian in the White House will use it to pursue policies towards China, with which I disagree. It's like the third time I've had to say that. I apologize for that, for reiterating that. But that is a very important point.
Yeah.
The intelligence agencies, analysts, saying that we're going to obscure and obstruct the president, obfuscate information getting to the president because we don't like him.
And when was that?
2020.
Right. So around the same time as ostensibly the same people were obstructing the truth about the Hunter Biden laptop.
Yep. Right around that same time. Yeah.
Yeah. And the Hillary Clinton. Oh, no, that was the election before that.
Those
Hillary Clinton emails. Yeah. But the tactics.
That's where it stems from.
Yeah. The tactics of the IC and, their partners on domestic soil and that network, the tactics were to manipulate and interfere in the election. The Hunter Biden laptop thing was bad enough. That impacted the race and the public mind towards the two candidates. This actually impacts the safety and security of the system, and the politics outweighing their sworn duty is, are they doing it to protect China? The guy says, I don't want him to enact policies against China that I don't agree with. So in that sense, I know I say it a lot, but we're at treason. We're at treason if your actions to undermine the United States are in service to a foreign nation. We're talking about treason.
I mean, it can be treason if you're refusing to hand over, information analysis on a foreign nation, and you're refusing to hand it over based on your own personal opinions and beliefs. Yeah. You're not in that position to be, a politician. You are in that position to be an analyst and to analyze things to the best of your ability, not to your personal ability, but to your actual ability, and hand that information over to the elected officials in this constitutional republic to decide, this representational republic, to decide on what they're going to do with that. And when you have people that are literally taking their own opinion and saying, we're not going to tell this to the commander in chief, the executive of the United States of America, because we don't want him to do something that would, be detrimental to China, that is absolutely treason. Yeah. There is no question about that. That is a rogue agency. Well, and I don't want to lump the entire agency, because it does go on to talk about, this was the time when then DNI Radcliffe, now CIA director, tell me that wasn't a strategic move. I don't think we've seen, the full extent of why Radcliffe was kind of demoted from DNI in the first term to CIA director in the second term. Broadly, that should be a demotion. But when you kind of think about how, the CIA is off on its own thing right now, its own kind of entity, you put him in there now and it's a whole new ball game. But Ratcliffe was saying, hey, this Chinese stuff is not, I'm with the dissenting report on this. I agree with this. And, now we're seeing kind of, how that sausage was made. And we're finding out that, the pro China didn't meddle report was based on opinion, or not opinion, but personal assessment and belief.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I just want to point out to, remind folks that where, I don't know about you, Brian, but where I first saw the DNI's into, you know, the IC report had to come out. DNI Ratcliffe is the only one that disagreed with the consensus report and pointed specifically to China. Saw that in devolution in 2021, right? That's or maybe it's 2022 when that piece came out, that part came out. I want to say it was 13, but I might be off on that. But that's the thing, is like, it's hard, I think, for us sometimes to the breaking news of it all, right? Like, oh, breaking news, like China's involved in our elections. Like, well, yeah, I mean, we've, you know, John Harold pointed out that memo that just was the substance of, you know, big breaking news by major players who are now brave enough to talk about election fraud. It's frustrating. It's also very encouraging, though, right? It is encouraging that some of these things, again, we are not supposed to still be talking about 2020. The people that stole 2020 were certain that the American public would just move on. Yep. And unfortunately for them, we're not gonna return the diamonds.
Nope. We bossed over all the social media platforms except a handful that stuck with us and allowed us. We took them over. If you think about that, the capitulation of YouTube, of, you know, Twitter eventually becoming X, you know, Instagram, like all these platforms, Facebook, Meta, whatever you want to call it now, they capitulated to us. Now, is it an all out, you know, victory? No, absolutely not. But we won. We're on YouTube right now. We're allowed to say vaccines, COVID vaccines, they might have been dangerous. We can say that shit now. You know, a year and a half ago, we couldn't even say that. So it is a capitulation. It is what Ash said, that they thought this would go away because they controlled all of the rods of power. They controlled it all. And now we're chipping away at that control. We are absolutely chipping away.
And I would just say the chipping away of the control, the changing of the hearts and minds as it pertains to elections and whether or not there are systemic issues with our election systems, we earned that increase in public support. Honestly, we earned it by, you know, Brian and I every Friday going deep on the different state mechanisms of fraud, the different lawsuits and legislation and efforts to undermine different NGOs that are involved. We've spent, you know, far too much time examining David Becker's own words and Mark Elias's own words and show it, just doing the best that we can, like we were talking about with Amy, doing the best that we can to shine a light so that the people can see. And the effect of that, in my opinion, is that the people have seen, right? 83% support the Save America Act. Back in 2021, voter ID was racist. Right? The number one response that you would get is voter ID is racist. Now in 2026, 83% of the population not only supports voter ID, but supports a piece of legislation to enshrine it in law because everybody recognizes that it's a problem. There are people like Brian and I in every single state that have been relentless on this issue and refuse to give it up, even after they've been demonized. They've been slandered by their state legislators and executives. They've been brought into court and sued, faced real consequences, reputational harm, called Nazis, called white supremacists and Klan members. And, oh, this is so reminiscent of poll taxes from the Jim Crow era, all sorts of slanderous character assassinations for demanding actual representation through real elections. And that, in my opinion, is going to be the story that history writes about this season, is that the people had been trapped in this sort of false reality. And it was the 2020 election, then, you know, combined with COVID and all these other ops that have been run on us. But when they stole the 2020 election, it broke the chains in the mind of the people and woke them up to reclaim America. And at 250 years from now, Americans are going to be celebrating this season and what we've done.
Amen. All right, let's jump in. We got a couple court stories. This one's interesting. And I'll show you why here in a second. From Bloomberg Law, Trump's trio of New Jersey prosecutors summoned before an angry judge. U.S. District Judge Zaid Qureshi ruled on Monday that the three lawyers in New Jersey, remember we talked about this story last week, in the replacement for Alina Habba, We're 3 lawyers that are kind of running that office now, while Haba is in a senior advisor role because she ran out of time, because the Senate is a feckless organization that does absolutely nothing that they're actually supposed to do, but they have puppy parades. The lawyers must testify about the office's operation before he will sentence a man convicted of possessing child pornography. So you're making lawyers come in to testify before you sentence a man with CSAM, yeah. Okay. Interesting. So immediately I was like outraged. I was like, this fucking judge, what is he doing? Hold on. The judge is actually right here. The trio must answer his questions about the current structure and leadership at the office, any plans to change it, and the legal authority of the prosecutor handling the pornography case. The office has been in turmoil since a different judge ruled last week that the administration illegally appointed the triumvirate to succeed Alina Haba as the top federal prosecutor. Karashi admonished Assistant U.S. Attorney Daniel Rosenblum, who appeared for the scheduled sentencing of Francisco Villafane. Quote, "You have lost the confidence of this and trust of this court," Karashi said. "You have lost the confidence and the trust in the New Jersey legal community, and you are losing the trust and confidence of the public." Judges have pushed back against the Justice Department, voting last year that Haba's deputy should succeed her after the interim appointment expired. Bondi immediately fired that deputy. Judge Brand last week put his ruling about the triumvirate on hold to allow for a possible appeal, but the next day, Karashi posed another written questions to prosecutors about who is running the office, directing them to answer questions at sentencing, directing them to answer at the sentencing, or asking them to postpone the hearing. Rosenblum said that he would answer questions at the hearing. Now, this is the part that I think the judge was actually correct here. At the hearing, Karashi assailed the government's investigation as quote unquote sloppy, saying that they entered a plea deal with Villafane without fully examining evidence that included images of babies, prepubescent children, and bestiality, according to the transcript. Who screwed up, Karashi asked, your office, the FBI, or both? It is probably a combination of errors. So Bloomberg leaves this story way short. Okay, jump over here to I don't even know what this is, but they got the transcripts from the court here.
Barawang News.
I checked it. This is actually from the transcripts. I'm reading the court's transcripts here. Okay. Karashi called the proposed plea agreement deficient, emphasizing that the suggested sentence was, quote, less than a third of the advisory range, despite the severity of the child abuse images. How did this screw up happen? This is a quote from the court. How did the screw up happen? Was it your office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, or both? How did you execute a plea agreement without knowing all the evidence on the device, only later to find out, oh my God, there's babies and prepubescent children and bestiality? It's so egregious, Judge, but we didn't address any of that. Who screwed it up? Your office, the FBI, or both? Mr. Rosenblum responded, it's probably a combination of errors. So the judge is right here. The judge is saying, we're not sentencing this guy. I'm not accepting your plea agreement with him because it's a third of the sentence this pedo should get. And you guys failed to do your due diligence and look through all the evidence and find the child pornography that was on the phone and all the other stuff that was on the phone. The judge was absolutely right here. And, you know, initially when I start that reading, you know, the district judges have been wildly against President Trump and the administration broadly. But in this is a case where he's right. That triumvirate shit the bed on this.
Yeah, well, it's an issue that there should be no daylight between good people and putting those kinds of bad people away forever.
Yep.
Can't be rehabilitated.
Well, I agree with that wholeheartedly. But this is a story where even with, Bloomberg, that was kind of looked over. Like that's glanced over, that the DOJ, the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey, and granted, to be fair.
Why do you think?
Well, that's what I was going to say. To be fair, the office is in shambles right now because the courts are literally putting it in shambles. Haba's in, she's out. This guy's got to go in. Now you've got 120 days before the Senate has to do that. Like, let them do their fucking jobs, right? Let them get themselves in place. Let them start hiring people instead of having judges come in and saying, well, you're no longer here. So now we have to scramble to find your replacement. And, that replacement, we don't want that replacement. And by the way, they serve at the pleasure of the president. So we don't want that person there. So it's, who knows what the real reason is, but there's still no excuse for that.
Yeah. Just to like tie it to the, the kind of red and blue jersey discussion we were having before. This is not a partisan issue. This is not that. And if we can't agree on this issue, on this prosecutorial, on using prosecutorial and judicial discretion to go in the direction that it appears the judge was going, if we can't agree on that as a society, we have way bigger problems than I think anybody wants to admit. The protection of children is a hill to die on.
And to your point about the red versus blue, I'm telling you guys a little insider baseball to how I put the show together, right? I start reading that article and I'm like, okay, why do we have a district judge whose name I can't even pronounce, right? Okay, that's whatever. You move on, you keep reading, and you're like, and this judge is passing off a sentencing on a child predator? Like, what is wrong with this judge? Okay. And then you keep going, and you get 7-8 paragraphs down into the nitty gritty, and you catch this one little detail in the Bloomberg article, and you're like, hold on, this judge might have been right. Let me go a step deeper and see if I can find some other, sourcing on this. And then you find it felt like that article was written to invoke an emotional response that MAGA, what's that?
Most of them are. Most of the articles are.
But it seems like it was invoked to make MAGA come out and be like, this judge is unhinged. He's stopping. He's letting a pedophile go. He's taking the side of a pedophile.
Yeah.
And then once MAGA's all like, hey, this judge really shit the bed, he screwed up. They're like, hey, no, the DOJ screwed up. They didn't catch the guy for everything that he actually did. They were giving him a third of the sentence that he should have gotten, all this stuff. And then MAGA looks really bad because, whoever was covering that looks like they didn't read the whole damn thing.
Well, okay. So one, because they probably didn't, right? And two, that is kind of you just described the landscape of the info war. The absolute state of the information war is that you would have thought that by now the majority of people would be where your head is, right? You hear something sensational. Hang on a second. I got to look into this. It seems like why is this judge crazy? Hang on a second. It seems like this judge might be right. Hang on a second. Why are our prosecutors, not going all the way on these kinds of things? But nobody gets past step one. The majority of people have an emotional reaction to step one, and then it turns into throwing punches on the internet instead of actual meaningful change in our communities on the ground. And, like we're talking about with the Senate and the SAVE Act, demanding change. I'll tell you what, man, if the people came out loudly and strongly, entirely peacefully, but loudly and strongly about why the hell is there a hesitancy to roll up CSAM. We know who it is. You guys track everything. The NSA and the other intelligence agencies have access. They know exactly who these people are. They know exactly where the CSAM is. They know all of these things. Why is there a hesitancy to go out and roll those people up and take them out of circulation, remove them from our society so that they can't hurt children? Because it doesn't end with CSAM, right? It escalates, just like any other addiction escalates, and they can't be rehabilitated. All of the studies point to that. So removing them from society must be a goal. I live in a state where MAPS is a thing, right? We have to be very empathetic because pedophiles were hurt people too. And so we have to be really empathetic to them. And in so doing, keep children at risk in our society. No, we don't. But the only reason, in my opinion, that is still the landscape is that the people have been too silent about it. The people are expecting other people to do the work. And I am not calling for the people to go out and do the justice work on this one, but demanding that the justice work is done. The voice of the people is impactful, especially when it's collective and very loud. And it's a hill to die on, as I said before.
So, not to pick on our good friend in the chat, Sammy the Squirrel, says it really made me mad that the judge was correct. Why did that make you mad? That's the question. Because if that made you mad, and I'll be straight with you, At first, I was mad reading it. It was an emotional roller coaster for me. I was pissed at the judge, and then I became pissed at the court, or excuse me, not at the court, at the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey. And then I sat back and I said, well, this is Trump's DOJ down there. So why, like, I don't know what to do with this anger. Well, from there, you got to look further and see why they were doing what they were doing. There could be circumstances we don't know about, but the fact that you were mad that the judge was correct, it means you're putting too much of an emotional response behind something that should be either truth and accountability, not one or the other, but both truth and accountability. So, again, I think that article was kind of a trap. It might not have been deliberate by Bloomberg law. They might not have done that deliberately, but a lot of people are going to take that bait. And I bet you if you happen to go and find coverage of that particular story in our spheres of influence and, the realm that we kind of exist in terms of our political, sphere, I think most people would report it that judge as a bad person. That judge was right.
So I wonder if that is like, you're watching the Super Bowl and your team, the ref makes a call on your team and it's like, oh man, the ref is crooked. And then you watch the replay and the ref was right. And you're like, damn it. I'm mad that the ref was right. That's the mental chains that need to be broken.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into this story here. Fox News, Obama appointed judge, and again, I hate labeling judges that way, but unfortunately, we kind of have to now. Orders the release of an MS-13 gang member with a history of rape, robbery, who attacked ICE officers.
Do we have to, Brian? Or is Fox News engaging in?
Fox News is engaging in that. And that's why I call it out. When I'm reading the article, if I'm reading the title, I'm going to say it. But when I'm reading the article, I usually skip over that. Because I don't think that should be relevant, although it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's like that. The first question when you read that headline for the, as you're consuming news, the first question should be, why is Fox News making that the first word?
Right.
Right.
I mean, look at the way I highlighted this. Look at the way I highlighted this. Earlier this month, U.S. District Judge Susan Richard Nelson skipped over an Obama appointee, ordered the release of Carlos Antonio Flores Miguel, an MS-13 gang member from El Salvador, from ICE custody. Okay. Now keep that in mind, the ICE custody thing. Flores Miguel was released in the United States under the Biden administration in 2022. On January 20th, he was arrested by ICE in Minneapolis where he violently resisted by punching and kicking ICE law enforcement officers and allegedly grabbed an ICE officer's gun from its holster, or tried to. Among Flores Miguel's crimes in the U.S., they included rape, resisting an officer, illegal reentry, and he was previously arrested in his native country, El Salvador, for robbery. Flores Miguel illegally entered the U.S. in September 2016, deported the following month, entered again in 2017, and deported in March 2017. And in October of 2021, Flores Miguel illegally entered the U.S. a third time and was released in June of 2022 in the U.S. Released, not deported. Twice deported under Obama, once under Obama, once under Trump. Joe Biden lets him go. You are now free to roam about the country. Southwest Airlines. A judge subsequently ordered his deportation after ruling that Flores Miguel could be removed to any country other than El Salvador. However, a federal judge, or Judge Nelson, ordered his release, citing the administration for recklessly publishing Miguel Flores' photo on a DHS website and describing him as one of the worst of the worst. Quote, respondents make no attempt to explain why Mexico or any country would agree to accept the worst of the worst. That's apparently her justification. I did not look at the transcripts. That's apparently her justification for allowing this guy to go free in the United States. Why would Mexico take them? That's not up to you, Your Honor. If Mexico says that we'll take them, put them in prison, away you go. An appeals court just ruled that Trump has the authority to do that. The DOJ and ICE have the authority to send them to third countries that are willing to take these people. And the judge says, you described him as the worst of the worst. Why would Mexico ever do such a thing? Don't know. That's between President Trump and Mexico. But now
it's crazy. That's the dark side of judicial discretion is that right there.
Yes.
We have so many problems, man.
All right, where are we going to go next? Because we are just about running out of time. Maybe, you know what? We'll skip over we'll skip over the Iran stuff. There isn't really anything crazy new in the Iran stuff. But we do have an update on Netanyahu's AI imagery. Did you see the newest one?
No, my favorite one is the one with feet on his hands, though.
Oh yeah, the joke. Yeah. So let's just read a couple parts from this New York Times reporting. Netanyahu posts proof of life video as AI sows doubt about what's real. Shocker. AI is disrupting their narrative war. Netanyahu's death was greatly exaggerated. Netanyahu was alive and well when he filmed an address to the Israeli people and posted it to social media on Friday. The video was rapidly dismissed by some as an artificial intelligence generated fake meant to deceive the world. Did his hands have 6 figures on them? First and foremost, I don't think his hands had 6 figures. 6 fingers. I don't think it did. And I think most of us agree.
In that first video, the one that's in that little thumbnail that you've got there, I never saw 6 fingers.
No, me neither. I saw a blur as he's moving his hands real fast, and the frames per second was pretty low. And maybe you could construe that as a 6th finger. I don't know. But then they issued the responses, and it gets interesting. But let me finish this before we get into that. Netanyahu, appearing to recognize the power and ridiculousness of the falsehood, posted a video, a polished video, from a coffee shop 2 days later. The latest demonstration of one of the dangers that AI technology has posed to global affairs. Not only can AI imagery can AI fakery deceive millions online, but real videos can also be dismissed as AI generated lies. So New York Times is telling you again, arbiter of truth, that those videos are real, guys. Now, this is known as a term from 2019. I looked up the origin of this term. This term derived from 2019, the liar's dividend. That is now reminds me of, what was that whiskey that's like the Angel's Cut? Is that, the whiskey where it's like the last like whiskey from the bottom of the barrel that's been soaked into the barrel, and the whiskey that's been sitting in the barrel gets in with it's the Devil's Cut or the Angel's. I think it's the Angel's Cut. Anyways, it's a whiskey term. The liar's dividend. Thousands of images and videos have emerged from the conflict, many real and many generated by AI, with the differences often nearly impossible to detect by scrolling online. That has caused some real footage of the conflict in Iran to be dismissed as online AI fabrications.
The Angel's Share.
The Angel's Share?
The Angel's Share is what it's referred to.
Isn't the whiskey called the Angel's Cut?
The Angel's Share is the portion of whiskey, roughly 2% annually, that evaporates from oak barrels during maturation.
Okay, the Angel's Share. There you go. The Angel's Share. The Devil's Cut. So it's the Angel's Share and the Devil's Cut.
There you go.
So now we're going to learn a little bit about whiskey, just because.
It is a spiritual war, Brian.
The Angel's Share, the Devil's Cut. What is the difference? Why is that?
Your intention in drinking the whiskey.
Well, what is the Devil's Cut now? I have to know. The Devil's Cut. If the angels get their share, the devil also demands his. The expression "the Devil's Cut" refers to the loss of distillate, which is often absorbed by the wood of the casks. So there you go. That's what I was thinking of, is the Devil's Cut, not the Angel's Share. I took both of them and put them together. Okay, so the New York Times liar's dividend, this whole thing. First and foremost, the Netanyahu thing. They put out the video, the 6 fingers. I don't agree with that video. I think that video was whatever. He's been missing, ultimately, other than these little pop-up videos, since I think March 2nd. He did like a thing in March 8th or 9th or something where he was at a health center, and they got a video of him and some photographs, but it's all from government sources. It's all, sources within his own government. And Israel, as much as people want to think, Israel, they have more media restrictions than a lot of countries. The Israeli media, the national and state media, are extremely limited as to what they can put out in terms of defense information stuff. I learned this going through the October 7th attacks, when you had the reports of the burned babies and all of that stuff that was coming out, and did a deep dive on, I think it was I-24, that broke the story about, I went into the house and I saw the babies, and then you find out that whole story was completely fabricated. Yeah, the government gets to determine what gets put out there. So when you see the government saying, hey, we got Netanyahu at this health center. Okay, well, where's all the private press? Where's anybody outside of the government press? You don't get anything. So then
Well,
what do they do? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just on the all warfare is based on deception, as Sun Tzu said. And you and I, prior to any of this, prior to October 7th, we did Scary Smart with Mo Gadot. We talked about that book on the air and talked about AI pretty extensively and the coming reality collapse, right? That was something that the AI dilemma as well, that the AI research community was warning of. Reality collapse. People aren't going to know what's real. And I think that we are living it now. It's more absurd than people probably expected. But Burning Bright talks about how if we're in and I'm using different words than he uses really big words and way too many of them. But if you consider if we're in an AI reality collapse, where people don't know what's real, is the way to teach the people, assuming, we're still trying to give power back to the people, is the way to teach people how to navigate that, to try and convince them that everything is real? Or would a better tactic be to flood the zone with as much absurdity as possible so people actually have to turn their brains on? I think the right tactic is the latter. I hope that's what they're doing. I think there's great evidence that that's what they're doing. I don't know, but that's where I'm at with it.
I think that you're right. And
somebody clip it.
So here's what I put on X. I said it's always the ears, right? And, most people were going through the response, and this was the video he put out with Mike Huckabee, our ambassador to Israel, yesterday. And, people were going out there, and, one person, I'm not going to name names, goes, "Oh, don't go there with the Netanyahu's dead." And I said, I never said he's dead. There's no implication here. I didn't even share a post that says that Netanyahu's dead. I don't know
Where did
one
that
way
come from?
Well, so a lot of people were like, he's been missing since March 2nd. The country's at war. He missed so the big takeaway is he missed an IDF security briefing council, and he never misses those. Gordon was telling me yesterday he never misses those. And I think who did Gordon
Is
say?
that pop the first time that I heard we all know Netanyahu is dead was with the 6-finger thing. And to me, it was like, well, when did that? But I didn't know the backstory of the missed meeting. Like, where did that come from was a legitimate question. I didn't know.
Yeah, he's missed meetings. He canceled an appointment, I believe, with Kushner and Witkoff. Like he's canceled a lot of meetings. I mean, again, the country's at war, and he doesn't miss the opportunity to go out there and garner support and everything else on this. And so a lot of people are getting pretty, they're speculating based on that. I'm not. I think that in an information war, all bets are off, and this could be, it's psychological operations that we're seeing right now. So we had the ring video yesterday we played where his ring disappears. I cannot disagree with what I see in that video. The ring disappears. Then we get this one today or yesterday.
Mr. Prime Minister, I wanted you to know the president asked me to come and make sure you were okay.
Yes, Mike. Yes, I'm alive.
I checked that, and I'm happy to see that. But he wanted to make sure because, you guys get along too well.
I know, and we shake hands with 5 fingers in each hand. But I have to tell you, I'm alive, but I have this card.
Oh.
And don't read it. So it's a punch card.
Mm-hmm.
Today I erased 2 names on the punch cards, and you see how many more to go on this batch.
You know what the good news is? My name is not on the punch card.
Your name is on the list of the good guys.
Thank you.
And what the president, the U.S. forces are doing is incredible. We're very proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. And getting rid of these lunatics would like to develop nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them to every American city after wiping out Israel. They ain't going to do that. We're wiping them out.
I love it. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
I mean, besides that being like ridiculously cringe, the internet does what the internet does, and they caught a whole bunch of weird ass things, man. And this one's one that I can't overlook. The ears. I said the post. It's always the ears.
With 5 fingers in each hand. But I have to tell you, I'm alive.
I don't know what's going on with this little line in here. Anyways, Mike Huckabee's wearing the same exact suit and tie that he wore like at their 2025 meeting. There's just a whole bunch of weird stuff going on with this. I think that this rumor is not going to be put to bed until Netanyahu is at either the Knesset or, addressing the press in some form or fashion. But this is the psychological war that we are, that's being levied upon us. And this is the emergence. I think the broader, picture here is what the New York Times is actually hitting on is the AI, disinformation age and the ability for them to control narratives through that. As long as you get enough people that come out there and say, oh yeah, that's totally real, or, oh, that's totally fake, you're going to influence the entire, population with that type of information. And how do you move around that? Jessica Storm in the chat says, Huckabee's head. Yeah, there's literally, if you go back and go frame by frame, you saw it. Okay. So
yeah, I think, Brian, though, it is naive to think that an appearance at the Knesset would solve any of this. But I think it's the way I see this, the people that really believe that he's dead and are committed to that story being true could be face to face with him, check for masks, and come to the conclusion that he's a clone. Right? Like, well, he's still dead, but they just have really good cloning now because people are committed to their stories, whether or not their stories are true. And it's a dangerous time for, the collective mind, but the collective mind has kept us in a dangerous reality for a very long time. So we've got to fracture that shit and get people to turn their brains on again.
Yep. I agree. All right, let's we got a few rants to get to before we get out of here. Artsy Joan, you guys are fantastic, and this show is too. Praying for us all. God will win. Brian, what are your dogs' name? Because I need to encourage their cooperation as I paint their cuteness. So the German Shepherd Malinois looking mutt, and he's a mutt. I'm not disparaging him. His name's Tango. The cattle dog is named Cash. The one that looks like a raccoon, and the tan brown one is named Johnny. So there you go.
I don't think she's painting Cash.
I don't know which one.
The one with the two of them that are snuggling.
That's Tango and Johnny.
Tango and Johnny are snuggling, I think, is what she's doing.
All right. Thank you so much. I cannot wait to see that.
She's an incredible talent and an amazing human being. Joan, we love you.
Yeah. Monty 710. I used to inspect quote unquote massage parlors in Las Vegas, Nevada. Strip malls had alarms. You could literally hear all doors lock, buttons under the front desk to warn people, naked people at foot massage back rooms. Damn.
Yeah, but that would never happen with like Medicaid fraud or Medicare fraud or childcare fraud or any of those kinds of things, right? I mean, those things are so serious and important that those kind of tactics used to protect the multi-million dollars of fraud wouldn't be used.
Never. Archie Joan, is being an independent a wasted vote or a spoiler vote?
So pretty sure Joan is in Georgia. In Georgia, I think the primaries are closed. So if you don't, they're open. They have open primaries.
That's how they said Raffensperger won in 2022 is that Democrats went over and voted for him.
Okay, so then your situation is more like mine, where if the primaries are open, being an unaffiliated voter, whatever that designation sounds like, it's called different things. Whatever that designation is, it allows you to vote in either primary. So you can decide if you want to cast your vote for a Republican candidate or if you want to cast your vote for a Democrat candidate. I'm actually thinking about voting in the Democrat primary for the first time. I've never voted in a Democrat primary ever. And I've never voted for a Democrat for a main race. I've voted for independents and third-party candidates, but I'm thinking about it because Jenna Griswold is on the primary ballot, and it's actually a competitive primary. And that's one of the benefits that you have is that you can be a spoiler. You can impact who makes it to the general election ballot in the primary process if you are an independent / unaffiliated voter that lives in a open primary state. The thing to understand, and everybody needs to figure this out for themselves, is that this varies state by state. Whether or not you're what access to elections you have as a voter that's unaffiliated with either major party really depends on your state. So look into it and then make your most informed choice that's in line with your values.
And Georgia is a open partisan primary. So you don't have to be a member of either party. You can pick which ballot you want.
Right.
But
And April Ann says in a fake election, and it's a fair point. I, on the record, I think elections are a battlefield. I also said earlier in the show, this issue keeps me up at night. When I say, make your most informed choice, that includes not voting. And I absolutely protect the right of people not to vote. My only request is if you decide not to vote, please check after the election, check the records and make sure that you didn't vote. Because that's a sovereign choice either way. And if you make the decision not to vote and somebody votes for you, your sovereignty and your voice is still being stolen, and you have standing because you've been harmed. It's a portfolio of crime if somebody votes for you.
And the last thing, Motifish in the chat says, I'm ducking the Joe Kent story. No, we covered that yesterday. I'm not ducking anything. I don't duck things. The one thing I will say
I'm
is
still giving that shit 72 hours, man.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I'll say is I read the letter, and I was going to make a post yesterday. I decided not to, but the way that letter's written, I can completely agree with Joe Kent for resigning on his beliefs. I can completely get behind that. I can also get behind what I've said is that President Trump has the track record with me based on everything Joe Kent wrote. He has the track record with me to understand that there is something bigger happening here. And I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because of that, because everything Joe Kent wrote, you're like, man, I totally get why Joe Kent's doing this. But if you take out what Joe Kent actually did and you read all of that and you say, make an assessment on what Trump is doing right now, you'd be like, man, Trump really didn't want to do this, but he had no other option. So I can go both ways with that letter. Respect Joe Kent for what he did. Also think it's totally got to be. I mean, just looking back a couple months ago at what Joe Kent was saying, what made him flip that quick on this? No clue. So yeah, again, I'm with Ash. 72 hours on.
It's a war of stories, and we're talking about people that exist inside of the intelligence community. So taking what's happening at face value is not something I'm willing to do. But I'm also not. I don't have enough information. Today, what we see from what I saw this morning is the flooding of all of his prior statements that seem to contradict his letter from yesterday. There is definitely something going on. I don't claim to know what it is, but I'm not going to have an emotional reaction to it because that is what the central planners want.
The last thing I'll say is, in addition to what you were saying, operating in that, he was a Green Beret, so he absolutely operates in that realm. Also, he did lose his wife in combat, and I totally can understand. I mean, I'm avidly anti-war, and I didn't lose a loved one, other than some of my Marines, which but not a spouse or something like that. So I can get that behind. I can get behind him on that as well. Last minute rant from Boom Diggity. I think the holographic portal text is used, and many confuse it for AI. And then a YouTube video, David Nussbaum's, demonstrates the portal's holoportation features. All right,
Thanks,
it's
Boom. It's
4
good to see
minutes. I can't play that, but I appreciate the link, and there it is, guys. I'll check that out though. I don't think I've seen that. So, all right, what you got coming up, Ash?
What do I have coming up? Tomorrow, Ghost and I have The Choice. We're starting season 3 of The Chosen. It'll be season 3, episode 1. Excited for that. And make sure that you guys are tuned in to the Badlands Substack. Every morning we do the brief. You want the latest Badlands takes. You want just the facts of a story and then a Badlander take on that story. The Badlands brief is where you want to go for the most important stories in the info war. It's badlands.substack.com.
All right. And then, oh crap, I don't have the newest soft disclosure ad lined up. What do I have on there that's 16 seconds?
I don't know. Should do Jay's mom, though.
I don't even think that one's on here anymore.
What?
I know. I have alphas. Should we play? Oh, I do have Jay's. I do have Jay's mom. You want to do alphas? We haven't done that one in a while.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We'll see you later. I am a kung fu master.
Why do you not respect me? You want to fight me? I will fight you to your death. Do you want to tame the mane that is your ugly beard? Do you want your beard to feel silky smooth? You want to make it illustrious, like my Kung Fu beard? Then you need Soft Disclosure Beard Oil. SoftDisclosure.com. Promo code Badlands.
A soft disclosure on your beard. Many lady come to you.
Patriots, the fight for truth doesn't stop at the screen. It's hitting the road again. Badlands Media is rolling into Nashville on April 9th through 12th for the next stop on the Great American Restoration Tour. Join your favorite Badlands hosts and like-minded Americans for 3 powerful days. Packed with unfiltered discussions, deep dive panels, and real debate. Hear the raw truth, ask the tough questions. No topic too hot, no question too bold. GART is where our community comes alive. Tickets are on sale now at badlandsmedia.tv/GART, where you can also grab a virtual pass and watch from home. Join us to question narratives and fight for America's future. Nashville's calling. The restoration continues. Get your passes today. See you in Music City.